Definitely more fun than me. Yeah, but is there a different way?
No, I meant,
Oh.
oh.
No. Nechama, Lawrence has an alibi. He's here. I can testify he's not. He's okay. 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 Me too. Kind of. What? My dad is 75. Yeah.
Of
Of course he can. Why not? Um, I wish I was young. Of course. Okay. Okay. And today we're also marking your side of Maxine's father, who passed 93 years ago? No. No.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like he was a very young guy, right? He was like in his 30s. No?
I was 40-ish.
40-ish. So today is his your side, and may his neshama have an aliyah. What I want to do today, I know we deviate, but I couldn't help myself. I want to speak about something for Shavuot. It's something that I've been playing with. Miri, if you're coming to tomorrow, oh, Neely also, right? So you're gonna hear that in Hebrew tomorrow, but so it's something I've been working on for a while. I find it fascinating. I hope you'll find it interesting also. I don't know my reading glasses, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and no,
You can bring my glasses.
no, it's okay.
They're not prescription.
I have them in the office. So just okay, but I think I can somehow work it out. Okay, so Shavuot, right? We're going to celebrate on Thursday night, Friday, Shabbat, Shavuot. And we know we usually call Shavuot as Chag Matan Torah, the holidays in which we receive the Torah, right? Ma'amad al Sinai, that's what we're celebrating. But what I think is that it's not that, it's also, at least in my mind, that this is whenever we think of Torah study, I like to think about it, how Torah becomes some sort of a power of tikkun, through chesed, through responsibility, through breaking that loneliness, the ability of people to create continuation, hope, leadership. That's the stuff I think that we see in Megillat Ruth. That is kind of the message of Torah. And on Shavuot, we celebrate also, according to tradition, the birth and the yortzeit of David HaMelech. And the story of Megillat Ruth is leading to David HaMelech. One of the reasons why we read Megillat Ruth on Shavuot. But it explains why specifically David, all the leaders that we had, the little David rejected. We'll get into that in a second. Not so clear when it comes to his lineage, not a classic hero, became the model for the kingdom of Israel. To that extent, it did not feel to say, etc., etc. David is the ultimate king. Okay. I'm sorry? Yeah, no, we're talking about people. Okay. So let's go. So it's a little bit of kind of a mysterious holiday, right? The Torah talks about that. If you look at the Torah itself, it talks about as agricultural holiday, right? The harvest, bikurim, the shtei halechem, the special 2 loaves of bread, the sacrifice. obviously the Torah doesn't talk about Chag Matan Torah, the day in which we receive the Torah. That's later on by Chazal. That's in the Gemara. The Torah doesn't refer to that. So the question becomes like, how that happened from the times of the Torah to the times of Chazal. Then it became like the time in which we received the Torah. It was obviously a very different holiday in biblical times. So we know that Shavuot is the ending of Pesach. Okay, there's obviously some of the connections, Sfirat HaOmer, between Pesach and Shavuot. We start the journey in Pesach, we leave Egypt, we're free people. During Sukkot, obviously, we remember that journey, the huts, the Sukkot in the desert, God's protection, all that kind of stuff. We spoke about that. And in Shavuot is not only physical liberty, but also responsibility, moral and spiritual responsibility, i.e., it's the Torah, receiving the Torah, that responsibility. And the Torah, I think, was given in order to create, and we talked about it many times, tikkun olam, not tikkun olam in the political sense that is used today, but literally tikkun olam and malchut shaddai. To make this world a better place, and to make that world, like to put it back in its place and balance of jealousy, of violence, of bad things that are happening, abandon, tragedies, depression, all the bad stuff that are happening in the world. The whole purpose of the Torah is to bring our world into a better place. And for us who follow the Torah, the whole essence of Judaism and the Torah, I think, is to make us better people, moral people. How we do that? By following the commandments of the Torah. Even that custom that we have tikkun leil Shavuot, when we talk tikkun, right, there's a custom to stay up on night of Shavuot and learn. We call it tikkun leil Shavuot. Why? It's tikkun, it's a repair. It means that something is broken. So by learning, it's not that I'm learning in order to acquire knowledge. It's in some way I'm supposed to restore the world somehow, bring harmony back to the world with my learning. Hopefully that learning impacts me. I become a better person. And through my actions, I help this world move in the positive direction. Okay. So we're familiar with the story of Megillat Ruth, right? We all read it. We spoke about that. Starts with death, hunger, exile, very gloomy future, and ends with birth, continuation, the lineage of King David. We're moving from tragedy to hope. Everything is happening not through a miracle, not at least that we recognize, but through actions of kindness, of chesed, small acts, human acts, very courageous acts. Ruth is doing chesed with Naomi, right? She says, I'm going to stay with you, my old mother-in-law, even though I can, she doesn't leave her. Boaz is doing chesed with Ruth. You see that stranger, that poor girl, and he gives her security, respect. Ruth is doing chesed with Boaz and with the family of Elimelech. She is interested in continuation, in maintaining the family's name and lineage. And Boaz is doing chesed with also, as he said, im hametim ve'achayim, both with the dead and the living. Asher lo azav chasto et hachayim ve'et hametim. So chesed, and we talked about that, I think, a long time ago. Chesed, kindness, we translate it as kindness, but if you look at the Torah itself, where do we see the word chesed? In a very surprising place. We said it in the Arayot. We read it in the in Mincha for Yom Kippur. All the prohibit relations. So one of them is chesed. It's called chesed. Chesed is not something that, something that is like, I'm doing something nice to you, even though I don't have to. It's something that break the norm, something that is outside of the taboo, like those prohibit relations. So the norm is, I have no responsibility towards you. You do your life, you live your life, Chesed is something that I do even though I don't have to. I get nothing out of it. Okay? And sometimes it's in a dangerous way. We're going to see it in a minute. And in order to maintain life, whatever that means, sometimes it's physical life, sometimes it's allowing somebody to live like a mensch. We say olam chesed yibaneh. That means that the world is built on chesed. And just to quote Rabbi Sachs for a second, he says, it's chesed is the love we do. It's the actions, the love we do. Okay. So, when we read Megillat Ruth, the Megillah itself ends with David. V'Yishai Yolid David. So that means we're not going to look at David himself, but rather we're going to talk about the characters, the circumstances, the powers before him that led to the birth of this unusual individual. Now, David, and the whole story is actually, it's the classic anti-hero, right? Not the blue blood or whatever. It's the opposite. He is complicated lineage, as we said. He's rejected. It's not that he was born perfect into the right family and all that kind of stuff. His greatness is because he took responsibility. He fails and he gets up. He sins and he repairs. So in order to understand that character of David, in order to understand that really unusual character, which represent the leadership of Israel, we need to understand four women that kind of created David, the lineage of David. Four women, each one of them acts as a result of tragedy, loneliness, rejection, and nonetheless brings continuity. Let's start. When we talk about Ruth, and we know that Ruth was the great-grandmother of David, so we call her Ruth Moavia. Ruth from Moab. So in order to understand, let's go to the beginning. Who was Moab? Who was Moab? Moab was son/grandson of Lot from his eldest daughter. Remember, God destroys Sodom. Lot and his two daughters are the only survivors of Sodom. They end up in a cave, right? And then he is together with his oldest daughter in one night, and with the other daughter, the second night, whatever. And as a result of that, Moab, two children are born, Moab and Ammon. They do that because they think it's the end of the world. Nobody is going to be with us. We need to continue humankind. There are no other people in the world. They thought the destruction of Sodom was the destruction of the entire world. It's almost impossible to imagine what she thinks, right? She saw her mother turns into a pillar of salt. The entire city, her entire world is destroyed. And then the only person that is left that's supposed to protect her is, at least according to Chazal in some way, it seems that also taking advantage of her somehow. So her motive, her reasoning is not romantic. Obviously, it's not personal. She thinks, she's convinced that this is the end of the world. It's a responsibility. So she does something that is radical, definitely against norms, breaks the taboo, right? And she sleeps with her father. So this is like the most radical case we're going to see. So as a result, Moab is born. Now, Moab obviously is not David, but Moab is the beginning of that nation from which Ruth eventually is going to come. In other words, also from the most distant, from the most foreign, the lowest place, whatever you can think of it, whatever you want to call it, there's the beginning of, let's call it salvation. That's the seed of salvation.
They were also the most unkind to
Of course, we're talking about, like, at the end of the day, we're talking about Sodom, the people of Sodom. And the daughters of Lot represent that, all that mentality of Sodom.
And Moab didn't help the Jews in the desert.
Correct. Right. He didn't get much better. Correct. But there's like this idea that, like, even within that brokenness and everything, there's like clinging to life, this message, this idea. I mean, she's mistaken. She did something wrong, but whatever. But she like, you know, that power of like life, let's call it, not giving up on the future, even though everything looks completely shuttered and destroyed. Okay. Couple of generations later, actually not couple, more than couple. Tamar, we talked about that. Tamar is the daughter-in-law of Judah. Okay, Judah, son of Jacob. His son is marrying Tamar. He died in early age. Second son marries her. He dies. And then we're familiar with the story. Yehuda sends her back to her parents' home and said, wait until my third son is ready, is old enough to marry you. Of course, he had no desire of actually doing that. She realizes that time goes by and this is not, so she takes action to her hands. And what happens is she disguises herself as a prostitute. As a result, Yehuda, after he's a widow already at that time, he ends up with her. He doesn't know, he doesn't recognize her, doesn't know that that's his daughter-in-law. And he gives her a collateral. When he sends the payment later on, she's nowhere to be found. 3 months later, he hears that she's pregnant. And of course, he thinks that she was unfaithful to the family, etc. As she is taken out to death, she says to him, Hakerna, like, I'm pregnant with the person who owns those items. And he obviously recognized it, and he says, Sadkami Meni, she was right, I was wrong. And anyway, so that's the story itself.
Anything about her?
She was a Canaanite. That's all we know. But Shua, but Shua, that was his. I'm sorry, that's his wife. But all we know is that she is a Canaanite. In any event, her motive is the continuation of the family, of the tribe, right? Because 2 sons already dead with no children. She sees that she's not marrying the third one. So the only way to have more children, continuation of that family, is through the father. So she's very sophisticated, she's very smart, she understands, she makes a plan, she knows where he's gonna go, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And she's able to execute her plan. And also, she doesn't embarrass him in public. Right? She doesn't say, even in order to save herself, she doesn't say, it's you. She say, it's the owner of those items. He could have easily said, I have no idea what you're talking about, and that's it, and bury that secret also, but he steps up. Okay. As a result of them being together, they're twins. Peretz and Zerach. Okay, twins, two boys. And Peretz is the great-grandfather? Yeah, I think so. Something like that. Of David. No, not of David. No, it's much more. But he's whatever. It's
like 500 years, I think.
yeah. No. But this is the lineage of the tribe of Yehuda continues from Peretz. So Tamar, by the way, also that name, Peretz. Peretz is from to break, right? Lifrotz is to break in, or so it's like he is also a poret. When we say poretz derech, somebody who paves the way. So he's also like this. I think there's like some perhaps symbolism with that name, that he breaks that taboo, those boundaries that we talked about. So Tamar teaches that sometimes chesed is courage. It's also teaching others, showing others to recognize reality. And from here, I think that David HaMelech gets his DNA also of tshuva, the ability, obviously, to sin, but to quarrel with the truth and eventually say, I was wrong. And we see that with David all the time. Like with Bathsheba, with the census that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, all those incidences. Okay, which brings us to Ruth. That's the story of the Megillah. I'm going to read the story on Shabbat. There's a famine in Israel in the times of the judges, Shvot HaShoftim. There's famine. Elimelech, Ish mi Beit Lechem Yehuda, family of the tribe of Yehuda. Because of the famine, they moved to the land of Moab. He leaves the land, he leaves the community. The family is trying to make it somehow. And there's assimilation. Elimelech's two sons, Machlon and Chilion, marrying Moabites, whatever you call them, women,
Princess.
according to Midrash, Ruth and Orpah, and they die also, and Elimelech also dies. And then Naomi, Elimelech's wife, she is left alone with two daughters-in-law. And things are not good. So at some point, Naomi says, I'm not staying here. I'm going back to Israel. At least over there, I'm going to be with my people. And Orpah indeed says, okay, it was nice being your daughter-in-law. I'm going back, and bye-bye. Ruth says, I'm sticking with you. I'm not leaving you. Okay, and so they go to Israel, and Ruth now is a stranger, right? She's a Moabite. She is a widow, no children. So from a social perspective, she's completely powerless. She has no certainty. She has no future. She has no reason to stick with Naomi. She has no reason to go to Israel. And by the way, Naomi is like trying to convince her, "Oh, what are you going to do with me? I'm an old lady. It's like I don't have children. I have nothing to give you." But I'm sorry,
Be wealthy, they work for their money.
there's no money, no nothing. So, but Ruth is loyal and she stays with her. And of course, that famous sentence, "Amech ami be'elokayich Elohai," that's what I'm talking about on Friday morning. If you're in shul, please come and I have a sermon that talks about this idea. "Amech ami be'elokayich Elohai." She accepts upon herself identity. Ruth is the first convert. And this is what basically she says. Your people, my people, your God is my God. And she accepts that destiny, she accepts that faith and future, nothing is promised, anything is unknown. Anyway, so here the chesed, unlike Tamar and the daughter of Lot, it's much more subtle. It's already, we can see that this is chesed like in the way that we think of chesed. She acts as of loyalty. Okay, what happens? She goes to the field to collect sheaves because that's what the poor people do. And that's also chesed. She's taking care of her mother-in-law, so they can make some bread. And that's when I said the love we do. She turned that love into acts, to action. She actually goes to the field and collects those. Okay. Then Boaz sees her, and watching her, that kind of unlocks that chesed by him. And he gives her protection. He said, "You're going to sit with my people, with my boys and everything, and you can take more and take food for your mother-in-law and all that kind of stuff." And he sees what the others don't. They see her as a stranger. Maybe even somebody who takes advantage of the system that we have in it, like, the Torah, taking care of the poor and the needy. Later on, in the night, she goes to Boaz. Also here, something very, very unusual. I mean, so again, you see the progression from the daughter of Lot ending up with her father. Okay, that's extremely unusual. Okay, to Tamar ended up with her father-in-law, also extremely unusual, but not as crazy as with your own father. And now here, a woman going into somebody else's bedroom, also unusual, but I don't know, we live in 2026. Okay, let's call it a little bit less unusual. But again, her motive, is for tikkun. She wants to maintain a continuation of the family. Okay, at that point, okay, Boaz already had feelings for her, and this is obvious, and this is why she goes there in the first place. She recognizes that. But Boaz has a problem. Both halachically and morally. Can he be with a Moabite woman? Okay? And he deals with that, and he deals with that, and he deals with the Sanhedrin according to the Midrash, and he's like, yeah. At the end of the day, they found a solution. Moavi velo Moavit. That means you can be with the women of Moab, but not with the men of Moab. Okay, whether this is like this or not really doesn't matter. The point is that that solution enables him to marry her. And as a result, Oved is being born. Oved is the grandfather of David HaMelech. So that Megillah, that book of Ruth that starts with death, ends with birth. Okay? So I think that Ruth is like already the refined character of Chesed. It teaches us that receiving the Torah is not only at Sinai. Receiving the Torah is the everyday choice to say, I'm not leaving, I'm not ditching somebody who is broken. I'm building a future out of loyalty. And this is why we read it, I think, on Shavuot, because this is the manifestation of receiving of the Torah. Receiving the Torah is wonderful, it's great. But the question, the much more important, is what do you do with that? It's like I remember there's a joke like that there's a kid gets tefillin for bar mitzvah. So that's wonderful. It's a great gift. You got tefillin. Now what? Are you going to put them on every day? Receiving the Torah is great, but what do you do about that? You need to live it. You need to do something with that. If it doesn't translate to our everyday life, so what's the point? Which brings us to a less known story, which is totally based on the Midrash. And then, like every time we deal with Midrash, we have to try to understand why the Midrash is doing that even. It's the story of David's mother. Her name was Nitzevet bat Adiel. Okay, again, the Midrash is the one that tells us even the name. In the book of Shmuel, we don't see the name. Nitzevet bat Adiel. Story of it. Okay. According to the Midrash, David's father, Yishai, at some point, I guess today you would call it like a middle life crisis or something like that, he starts to doubt his lineage and whether he is actually a Jew. Again, going back, his grandmother is Ruth. So yes, Boaz found some sort of a solution to bring Ruth, to marry Ruth, and right, she becomes. But what I think Chazal are trying to teach us in that Midrash is, one, not everybody accepted it. It was not that simple, not that easy. And 3 generations later, people are still talking. Yeah, they're Jews, but I don't know. There's some, I don't know. I don't know if they're really kosher Jews, that family. Okay? So he has this crisis at some point. And therefore, what he decides to do is to separate from his wife, Nitzevet. So they have already 6 children by then. David is the 7th. 8? Maybe you're right. I thought it makes no difference. There are already other kids.
There's a lot of kids before.
And then he has this crisis, and as a result, he decides to separate himself from his wife. And he said, like, maybe I'm not really Jewish, blah, 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 whatever. And he goes into all that loophole. I printed that with Rash. So but it's also a sin to live without a woman, like, to live alone, like whatever. So he decides that, it's a whole halachic, whatever, back and forth, whatever, pilpul, Evet Knani, whatever, the whole thing. he has a servant, and he decides she's not fully Jewish, I'm not fully Jewish, I'm going to be with her, and by that, we can continue like, we live together, it solves her problem, it solves my problem, and I'm not getting into that stuff. Okay, whatever. Listen, this is like somebody else would say, he just wanted to be with her, and that's it. But whatever, it doesn't matter. Point is, to make a long story short, that servant goes to her mistress, to Nitzevet, and she says to her, okay, that's the plan. And I think what you should do is we'll switch roles. And then indeed Yishai ends up with his wife because it's dark or whatever, and it's already after years of separation. And they end up spending the night together. He doesn't know that this is his wife. And as a result, David is born. Okay. By the way, now I'm going to bring it into my other. It's a narrative that you find in a lot of tales. Like there's operas also, like with that stuff, right? In Don Giovanni, it appears the same idea. You switch or whatever, it doesn't know, whatever. It's in Così fan tutte. What? Leah and Rachel. It's a narrative that you see in a lot of places, Jewish and not Jewish, whatever. Doesn't matter. That's not the issue. Yishai doesn't know that that's his wife, but he sees that his wife is pregnant, and then there's a baby, and he doesn't look like his siblings, and his father doesn't recognize him as his son. He thinks that his wife was unfaithful to him, and it takes 28 years, and she lives with that insult, and she doesn't tell him. 28 years until Samuel comes and declares David is the king. And then Yishai understands everything, and he... Okay. So now, forget about like the story itself, the circumstances. Let's try to kind of look at the ideas here. So Nitzevet, her interest is obviously she wants her husband back. She wants her family back. And she wants to have another child. So what she's done, she's doing it out of loyalty to the marriage, to the family, and because she believes you can create a tikkun, even though they're being separated for years and all that kind of stuff. You can create a tikkun. And this woman who is humiliated for 28 years is eventually she's recognized as somebody who didn't sin and as the mother of the king. So Nitzevet brings this thing to its peak. After generations of women that were rejected, foreigners, here we're talking about inside the home, somebody who's Jewish, within the family of Yishai, just before David himself. So we see progression in every time through those four stories, those four women. Okay, in every story of those four women, there's a man, right, a central figure that leaves, that reject, that Lot, Yehuda, Elimelech, and Yishai, and they need to make choices. And every time, every story, there's a woman, and she is in the margins of society, a foreigner. We'll see in a second. Well, to some extent, yes. You'll see in a second. She's a foreigner. She's a widow. She's rejected. She's humiliated. She's powerless. Nitzevet also.
She was powerless.
She's rejected by her husband.
But she herself thinks it's darkness.
Okay, but that's midrash also, and we're really
Right.
but the point is, it doesn't matter. Like, she's
Right.
she's being pushed.
Right. Not just her husband.
It's also her children
Right.
that rejected her for 28 years. Okay, in every story, the future looks kind of blocked. There's no home, there's no continuation, no children, no goel, there's no recognition. In every story, that woman doing something creative against norms in order to create, in order to create continuity. In every story, there's a child as a result, and that every time there's a progression until we come to David, from Moab to Peretz to Oved and to David. There's a progression from one generation to the other, from Sdom, which is the most, let's call it perverted, thank you, case and place, etc., through Tamar and Yehuda, through the chesed of Ruth and Boaz, and into the story that happens within the family, inside the home, between Yishai and Nitzevet. It's a DNA of chesed. Not chesed like, this soft, sentimental chesed, but it's a chesed of responsibility, with conditions that nobody else take responsibility. And that chesed is refined from every generation until it becomes David HaMelech. A king that understands what it means to be broken, that understands rejection, that understands tikkun, that understands tshuva, and that defines David. That's exactly what defines him. So, we said that on Shavuot we celebrate Matan Torah. The Torah we receive at Sinai, but the Torah cannot remain at Sinai. The Torah is being examined. The Torah is being tested in the field with Ruth, with Naomi at home, with the decision of Boaz, with the actions and shame of Tamar, with the pain of Nitzevet, and with the ability of a person to take something that is broken and transform it into responsibility. We call David HaMelech, we say, David Chai Vekayam. David Melech Israel, Chai Vekayam. Right. Why David Chai Vekayam? Not because he was perfect, but rather because he manifests or represents to us something very, very basic in Judaism. That you can build a kingdom of tikkun also from rejection, also of the most remote circumstances. So yes, our story, our lineage, our fathers, our DNA is a key for our history. However, they do not promise nor limit our legacy. What really counts is not where we come from, but rather what do we do with that? What do we do with what we have received, and how do we make a tikkun olam with the love that we do? It's not for nothing that Chazal take this idea and they say that there's a crown of kehuna, right? But in order to be Kohen, you have to be a son of a Kohen. There's a crown of kingship. But in order to be a king, you have to be a descendant of King David. וכתר תורה עולה עליהם. I'm sorry?
Ketzer Shem Tov Alala.
Keter Shem Tov, that's a different one. There's the
No,
Keter Shem Tov. You're right. Right. Keter Shem Tov Ole Al Kohen, right. But it's also, but by the way, there's like there are two places they talk about Keter Torah and also Keter Shem Tov. But your own reputation, what you do with things, is the best crown. That means that you're not limited. In fact, Ruth could have said, like, I'm a Moabite. What do you want from me? It's like, leave me alone. I'm going back. I'm staying here in my country. Maybe I'll find some sort of a whatever, something, right? Yehuda could have say, I don't know what she's talking about, bury that secret. Tamar would have died, and that's the end of the story. No embarrassment, no nothing. Nobody would ever know anything. Nitzevet could have just accepted. The daughter of Lot could say, okay, well, it is what it is. It's the end of the world. Well, what do you want from me? I'm not doing anything about that. But each one of them, and by the way, Boaz, he could have said, okay, not my problem, not my business. But each one of them teaches us something, that they take responsibility. They see something that is broken, something that needs repair, and they believe that they have the power to do so, and they act on it. And I think that this is it's part of the DNA of King David. Probably it's the DNA of all of us. And it's that ability, and I think that that's what the Torah is expecting us to look at reality, to recognize, to ask ourselves, what is broken? What's not okay in our world? What do I see that needs a repair?
Yeah.
And then I need to go and fix it.
Can we fix the round?
To the ability of what I can, right?
I think at least try.
At least try, and then learn from David HaMelech that if I fail, I know I need to do tshuva, and I need how to get up and try again.
Yes.
And this is something that is, I think that's what it's all. That's the whole concept of receiving Torah. We try to do the right thing. How do you know what's the right thing? It's written in the Torah. But even if we fail, we need to fix it, if possible, and then try again. That's a life of responsibility. That's a life of a Jew. That's a life of what the Torah, I think, is expecting us to do. And that's what we call tikkun olam.
That was my mother.
I'm sure.
My father died before I was born.
I understand.
I don't know how she did it.
She did it. Okay, Terry, you had a question.
I think we've covered everything. I know the story of the seven. It's not important how it is, and I know the story.
Yeah.
I think no, I think it's amazing. I think that David went through really struggles his whole life,